They were a peaceful, cooperative species known throughout the galaxy for their diplomacy and non-violent ways. Their forms, towering and graceful, were recognized as symbols of wisdom and patience. When humanity first encountered the two species found much in common. Both favored cooperation over conquest, curiosity over aggression. Trade agreements were quickly established, and cultural exchanges flourished. They admired humanity's adaptability and resilience, while humans respected them for their sophisticated mediation skills. The alliance was hailed as a model of cooperation. For a time, everything seemed perfect. But peace is fragile, and even the gentlest species have their limits. The first encounter between humans and the occurred at the edge of the galactic frontier. A Terran exploration vessel, the Pathfinder, detected an unknown signal from a nearby system. Upon investigation, they discovered a diplomatic outpost, a sprawling complex of aorganically grown structures that shimmered under the system's twin suns. They welcomed the human delegation with open arms, their antennae twitching in curiosity. Their language, a blend of melodic clicks and soft vibrations, was quickly deciphered by human linguists. It was an encounter unlike any other. No fear, no territorial disputes, just two species eager to learn from one another. As communication between their civilizations grew, they extended an invitation to the Terran Republic. Human ambassadors visited a lush and bioluminescent planet with towering fungal forests and vast underground cities. The air buzzed with the gentle hum of their civilization, a harmonious blend of nature and technology. They prided themselves on their lack of warfare. Conflict, to them, was an ancient relic of a more primitive time. Instead, they had perfected the art of negotiation, of compromise, of finding solutions where others saw only problems. Humanity was fascinated by the way of life. They did not build walls or fortresses, nor did they maintain standing armies. Their defense systems were designed solely to deter external threats, automated measures meant to disable rather than destroy. Their economy was based on collective effort rather than competition, their social structures built around cooperation rather than hierarchy. To many humans, it was an idealistic dream come to life. To others, it was a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. The early days of the alliance were filled with celebration and mutual admiration. Trade routes were established, allowing humanity access to the advanced medical technologies, while they embraced humanity's ingenuity in engineering and exploration. Interstellar academies were founded, where human and scholars worked side by side, exchanging knowledge and culture. For the first time in galactic history, two species had formed an alliance not out of necessity, but out of genuine respect and friendship. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. While humanity admired the peaceful ways, they could not ignore the reality of the galaxy, a universe filled with warlike species, empires, and predatory corporations. Some human leaders worried that they were unprepared for the dangers lurking beyond their borders. They had no military, no weapons of war, no means of defending themselves beyond diplomatic negotiations. And negotiations, as history had taught humanity time and time again, did not always work. There were whispers within the Terran Republic, concerns that they were naive, that they were too trusting, that their utopian ideals made them vulnerable. Some feared that it was only a matter of time before a less scrupulous force took advantage of them. But others believed that they could be taught, that they could be guided toward a more balanced way of life, when that embraced peace without neglecting the need for. For now the alliance flourished, and humanity and they celebrated their newfound friendship. But the galaxy was an unpredictable place, and they had yet to experience its darker side. Humanity, for all their admiration of the ideals, knew one thing for certain: peace only lasted as long as those who wished to maintain it were willing to fight for it. And they had never learned to fight. The Galactic Trade Syndicate saw them not as allies, but as easy prey. Their, rich in rare minerals and valuable aorganic resources, became the target of ruthless corporate expansion. What started as a series of seemingly fair trade agreements quickly turned into exploitative contracts. The, trusting as they were, signed away rights to their own lands and industries. Soon entire colonies were under corporate control, their people forced into endless labor to fuel the syndicate's greed. The, ever dedicated to diplomacy, tried to protest, but their voices were drowned in legal jargon, bureaucratic loopholes, and oppressive enforcement. Humanity, watching from the sidelines, knew what was happening, but they also knew the syndicate played by rules no government could easily challenge. Yet not all Terrans were bound by politics. In the shadows, human smugglers, mercenaries, and rogue agents made contact with workers. If they wanted their freedom, they would have to fight for it. And if they were willing to learn, humanity would be more than happy to teach them. At first, they did what they always had, tried to negotiate. Their diplomats traveled to the Galactic Council, appealing to reason and fairness. They pleaded their case before the trade regulators, citing their original agreements and calling for arbitration. But the syndicate was too powerful, its influence embedded deep within the bureaucracy. Every appeal was delayed, every legal motion bogged down in endless red tape. By the time they realized they were being stonewalled, their people were already suffering. The work conditions deteriorated. Laborers were treated as little more than expendable assets, forced into grueling shifts in dangerous environments. The cities of the became industrial wastelands, their beautiful aorganic architecture smothered by layers of pollution and automated factories controlled entirely by syndicate executives. Resources that once belonged to the were stripped away, their own economy dismantled until they were left with nothing but servitude. Still, they did not fight back. They believed, even then, that their words and pleas would be enough. But then came the breaking point. A group of workers, desperate and starving, attempted to organize a strike. They refused to work until their conditions improved. The syndicate's response was swift and brutal. Private security forces, effectively mercenaries on corporate payroll, descended upon the strikers, breaking the protest with violence. Leaders of the movement disappeared overnight. Entire families were deported to unknown labor camps. Fear spread like wildfire, and for the first time in their history, they began to understand a cruel truth. Diplomacy would not save them. Humanity had seen this before. They had witnessed oppression in countless forms across their own history. And while the Terran Republic could not openly challenge the syndicate without violating intergalactic treaties, individuals within humanity took matters into their own hands. A network of smugglers, mercenaries, and former soldiers began slipping through the cracks of the syndicate's iron grip, bringing supplies, weapons, and most importantly, knowledge. They had never fought a war. They had never needed to. But humans knew how to fight, and they knew how to teach. In secret meetings deep within territories, workers met with Terran operatives. They learned how to organize, how to communicate without being detected, how to disable syndicate equipment without raising alarms. Simple acts of resistance at first, small delays in production, security malfunctions, sabotage that could be blamed on errors. But the lessons grew more advanced. Soon, learned how to fight in ways the syndicate never expected. The first real blow came when an entire mining operation went dark overnight. Security forces arrived to find the site abandoned, the machinery destroyed, the syndicate insignia painted over with the sigil. It was a declaration, a sign that they were no longer willing to suffer in silence. From that moment on, the resistance escalated. Coordinated strikes across multiple planets disrupted entire supply chains. Syndicate patrols vanished in the dark, their last transmissions nothing more than garbled distress calls. For every crackdown, for every show of force, they fought back hardened. The peaceful species had been pushed to the brink, and now they had found something new: resolve. The syndicate realized too late what was happening. The once meek and pacifistic had been transformed. They had learned from the best. They had learned from humanity. And the galaxy was about to witness the birth of a revolution. It began as whispers in the underground labor camps, as quiet meetings between exhausted and hardened human veterans who had seen too many battles. They taught the how to resist, how to sabotage, how to turn their vast knowledge of industry against their oppressors. The once-docile and trusting adapted quickly. They learned how to fight in ways the syndicate never expected, disabling supply lines, hacking into financial systems, even reprogramming automated security drones to turn against their corporate masters. What had once been peaceful workers became strategists, warriors, revolutionaries. When the first major strike happened, a factory going up in flames, humanity watched impressed. They had always been intelligent. They just needed the right push. The fight escalated quickly. Syndicate enforcers cracked down hard, but every time they tried to put down a rebellion, more rose in defiance. Terran mercenaries began operating openly, running weapons and supplies to the rebels. The galaxy held its breath as the species took up arms. By the time the syndicate realized the scale of the threat, it was too late. They had learned what it meant to fight, and they were done being slaves. Across multiple worlds, resistance cells began coordinating attacks. They, with their unparalleled industrial knowledge, created makeshift weapons from mining tools, cargo haulers into bombers, and built underground networks of supply routes to evade detection. Human advisors helped them refine their tactics, turning what was once disorganized chaos into an insurgency. Every syndicate supply line became a liability. Every factory they controlled was at risk of sabotage. Every transport ship was a potential ambush target. The syndicate responded with brute force. They deployed elite security units, flooded colonies with surveillance drones, and executed suspected rebels in the streets. But this only fueled the fire. They had finally seen the truth. Diplomacy had failed them. The only language their oppressors understood was violence, and they were now fluent. Instead of breaking under the pressure, the resistance intensified. The Strachey syndicate leaders hacked into financial accounts and rerouted entire shipments of weapons and supplies to their own growing forces. They turned the syndicate's greed against them, creating shortages that sent shockwaves through the galactic economy. One of the defining moments of the rebellion came when a syndicate warship, the Sovereign Prophet, attempted to deploy orbiter strikes on a rebellious colony. The Terran Republic could not intervene directly, but independent human mercenaries, fighting alongside hijacked the warship from within. The engineers, using their intimate knowledge of the ship's design, turned its own weapons against the syndicate fleet. The battle lasted only a few hours, but by its end, the Sovereign Prophet, a symbol of syndicate power, was a burning wreck falling through the atmosphere of the very colony it had sought to destroy. This victory sent a message across the galaxy. They were no longer weak. They were no longer victims. They had become something else entirely, something the syndicate could no longer control. And with each passing day, more of their enslaved brethren joined the fight. The resistance transformed into an army, their ranks swelling with former workers turned soldiers, scientists turned strategists, diplomats turned leaders of war. The syndicate, now facing catastrophic losses, tried to negotiate. They offered reforms, promised better conditions, even offered to return some of the stolen lands. But they had learned their lesson. They knew better than to trust empty words. Their demands were simple: complete and unconditional freedom. And when the syndicate refused, they answered in fire. Entire territories fell in rapid succession. Their planetary governors abandoned posts, fleeing in fear of the rising tide. The grasp of the corporations was unraveling. They, who had once placed all their faith in the rule of law, had become the architects of their own liberation. Humanity had shown them how to fight, but the war belonged to them now. As the syndicate's empire crumbled, they declared their independence, broadcasting their victory across the stars. The species had taken up arms and shattered their chains. They were no longer the defenseless diplomats of old. They had been reforged in the crucible of war. And the galaxy would never see them the same way again. The war was brutal, but in the end, they won their freedom. The Galactic Trade Syndicate, faced with mounting losses and a crumbling financial empire, withdrew, leaving the in ruins but liberated. What came next was something no one had expected. The once peaceful mediators had been transformed by war. Many stayed behind to rebuild, but others, those who had fought, who had bled, who had learned from their human allies, found that they could never go back to the way things were. They took to the stars, traveling as mercenaries, bounty hunters, and explorers. Some fought to free others from oppression. Some sought revenge against those who had once enslaved them. And some simply wanted to see what else the universe had to offer. The Terran Republic welcomed them as equals, as friends forged in fire. They had changed forever. They used to be so nice. And then they met humanity. The galaxy watched in awe as they established their place among the stars. Their warships, sleek and efficient, bore no resemblance to the fragile diplomatic vessels they once piloted. Their soldiers, trained by some of the most hardened human veterans, fought with precision and unrelenting discipline. They were no longer the helpless victims of corporate greed. They had become a force to be reckoned with. The Galactic Trade Syndicate's influence shrank as word of the uprising spread, emboldening other species who had suffered under similar oppression. Revolts sparked in territories, and it was clear that their time of unchecked power was coming to an end. Among the opinions differed on what their new path should be. Some wanted to create a strong, centralized military force to ensure their people would never be enslaved again. Others believed their mission should be to help other species achieve the same freedom they had fought so hard for. Many warriors found themselves working alongside Terran mercenary groups, providing protection for independent colonies or hunting down the last remnants of the syndicate's enforcers. They had become something new, a species that had mastered the art of both war and diplomacy, equally capable of extending a hand in peace or striking down those who threatened them. As the years passed, the Terran Republic remained close allies. The humans had given them the tools to fight, but they had shaped their own destiny. They were no longer the naive idealists who believed diplomacy could solve every problem, but neither had they become mindless warriors who sought conquest. They had found balance, a people who could negotiate with wisdom but wield a blade when needed. They began to rebuild, not just in structure but in spirit. The scars of war remained, but so did the pride of victory. Statues were erected to honor those who had fallen in the fight for liberation. New generations were raised with a sense of resilience that their ancestors had lacked. Their culture evolved, blending the old with the new, incorporating the lessons learned from humanity while holding on to their values of unity and cooperation. Meanwhile, the remnants of the Galactic Trade Syndicate had all but vanished, reduced to a shadow of their former power. The corporations that had once controlled entire worlds now found themselves hunted, their leaders living in exile, hiding from the vengeance of the very species they had tried to enslave. They did not forget, and they did not forgive. Every corrupt executive, every enforcer who had brutalized their people, every figure who had profited from their suffering was systematically tracked down. Some were given trials. Others simply disappeared, never to be seen again. They had changed, and the galaxy had changed with them. Where once they were dismissed as harmless pacifists, they were now a respected and feared force. Their ships patrolled trade routes, their soldiers fought in distant wars, and their name carried weight in diplomatic halls. Those who underestimated them did so at their peril. They were no longer just diplomats or victims. They were survivors, warriors, and pioneers of their own fate. As they expanded further into the galaxy, new opportunities arose. Some joined expeditions into uncharted space, eager to explore what lay beyond the edges of known territory. Others formed their own mercenary companies, taking contracts that ensured their skills were put to use in battles where the weak needed protection. The phrase, "you don't want to fight," became a common warning among criminals and warlords alike. The story of the became one of legend, how a peaceful people were forced to learn the ways of war, how they rose against impossible odds, how they transformed from negotiators into warriors. Some mourned what they had lost. Others embraced what they had become. But all of them knew that they would never allow history to repeat itself. And so they took to the stars, their antennae now raised high in defiance. They used to be so nice. And then they met humanity. And now they would never be underestimated again.